Recently, the world is talking about nothing but Venezuela, where a political disaster took place. The president went missing. Under the wing of night, Nicolas Maduro was snatched by the American military and escorted to the U.S. to stand trial for drug trafficking. Today, we'll try to up what happened to Maduro, Venezuela, and the U.S. that pulled off such a daring operation. We'll talk about Maduro's relocation to the New York jail, and the reaction to it from the American public, whose opinions on the matter vary quite drastically. But let's begin with the star of the show, Nicolas Maduro, who, unexpectedly for everyone including himself, wound up in another country sporting prison garments. Operations images feature Maduro in a hip sweatsuit and a pair of shades, which turned out to be pretty mimetic, and the subsequent video shows him and his wife being escorted to New York. They were brought there because their capture followed the criminal case filed back in 2020 by New York's Southern District Court. Ergo, they were sent to the Metropolitan Detention Center. The facility has hosted a series of notable inmates. Currently, Luigi Mangione is being held there awaiting trial for the alleged murder of an insurance company's CEO. Among other famous detainees who spent time there were rappers P. Diddy and R. Kelly, crypto investor Sam Bankman-Fried, drug lord El Chapo, and Jeffrey Epstein's associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Maduro has already made a court appearance that was rather predictable. In accordance with the standard procedure, it was a plea hearing. Maduro pled not guilty. He added that he still remained president of Venezuela and considered himself a prisoner of war. His wife pled not guilty as well. Maduro is accused of narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and, suddenly, possession of machine guns. Naturally, he was denied bail. So Mr. POW has to make himself at home at Brooklyn's detention center. As for good news for him, he managed to secure a top-notch defense attorney, Barry Pollock, who represented the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. This moment calls for a pause to mention the most hilarious outcome. Maduro has quite a chance to be found not guilty. The U.S. independent court system leaves the possibility for the government to lose. There are two factors that make such an outcome possible. First, Maduro is facing a jury trial by ordinary New York residents, which is always unpredictable. Second, the judge isn't exactly the Trump administration's lapdog. He was appointed by President Bill Clinton and has a lot of experience, and a record of contradicting the current administration by ruling against immigrants' deportations. Prosecutors who have dealt with him told Politico about his independence bordering on stubbornness. So there'll be no predetermined verdict for Maduro. The trial will be real, lengthy, and tedious. However, the guilty verdict is very probable. There's been a precedent. Back in the 1980s, the U.S. captured another Latin American dictator, Panama's leader Manuel Noriega. The difference is that they didn't manage to pack him into a helicopter within 30 minutes. It took a full-scale ground invasion. At some point, Noriega took sanctuary. In the Vatican embassy, Americans didn't dare to attack, fearing God's anger. Both sides wanted Noriega out. Americans blasted rock music at inhumane levels outside of the embassy, while the papal envoy preached to Noriega inside. The dictator eventually surrendered and faced the same accusations. In the U.S., Maduro is facing today. Noriega's further fate was far from the brightest. After 17 years in the U.S. jail, he was extradited to France and later to Panama, where he died in prison. Is Maduro facing the same fate? No one knows. Federal narco-terrorism charges don't bode well for him. If found guilty, he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. We'll be gradually learning the details from his court hearings. It'll be long until we know the verdict. At least several months, if not years. Now let's have a look at Venezuela. After all, the country has lost its president. There should be chaos, political transformations, or at least any changes at all. But it's not the case. That is the originality of the American special operation, which does not seem to have led to any regime change yet. The Venezuelan authorities admitted that the U.S. troops took Maduro. The only alternative would be presenting his doppelgangers. Venezuela's Supreme Court ordered VP Delcy Rodriguez to become the interim president, and she was already sworn in. In her first speech, she stated that she was a temporary replacement and Maduro remained the legitimate president. But there seems to be no way for Maduro to return anytime soon. So the new leader's election is due. At the time of Maduro's capture, it appeared that Venezuela's democratic opposition would take over. While it's severely oppressed, it's rather alive than dead. According to various metrics, their candidate Edmundo Gonzalez won the 2024 election. Maduro simply declared his own victory regardless. A few years ago, the opposition even had a majority in parliament. But Maduro implemented a rather straightforward fix. He replaced the old parliament with a new one. Long story short, the Venezuelan opposition has popular support. But the dictator couldn't be bothered pretending to give AF. We said that the Venezuelan opposition had popular support. So what are they up to? First things first, Big Daddy Trump didn't help them at all. They came, they snatched Maduro, they left. Now, Trump claims that the U.S. will run Venezuela. But pretty much no one knows what it actually means. As of now, the Maduro regime lives on in its leader's absence. So the opposition's next step is pretty obscure. One of its leaders, Maria Corina Machado, last year's Nobel Peace Prize winner, offered her award to Trump in order to entice him. Given Trump's behavior, the idea isn't that futile. But Trump has already told journalists he doesn't believe in Machado's popularity and won't cooperate with her. So it seems that Venezuela won't see much change. The regime persisted. Perhaps it'll be led by VP Rodriguez, Maduro's son, or anyone else for that matter. Although, some changes have taken place already. For instance, there were reports on 800 political prisoners to be released soon, including the presidential candidate who'd win a fair election. As of today, some were reportedly freed already. The events have stirred a discussion in the U.S. After all, it's a country that prides itself on freedom of speech, and every citizen and politician has their own opinion on the matter. Let's have a peek. Let's not forget that U.S. politics is based on the permanent juxtaposition of two parties that constantly criticize each other's actions. So we expected that Maduro's capture to be polarized according to party allegiance. This time, however, the division was rather vague. A few famous Democrats supported Trump's operation. Jared Polis, the governor of the southwestern Democratic enclave known as Colorado, tweeted praised Maduro's ousting and called it a reason for celebration. He opened his first tweet on the matter with Libertad, Spanish for freedom. Naturally, Polis mentioned his disapproval of Trump for hiding the operation from the Congress, which didn't change his overall approving tone. Many Democratic MOCs and senators issued mixed statements as well. They feel excited about Maduro's removal as they find him illegitimate. But just like Polis, they expressed their concerns about Trump and co. keeping the operation secret from the Congress, relevant committees, or anyone for that matter. The reason why Maduro's displacement defied America's two-party discourse is as practical as it is political. There are a lot of Venezuelan-born people and their descendants in the U.S. Moreover, there are a lot of people of Cuban ancestry as well who have experienced a similar leftist dictatorship. Those people have defected from their regimes and understandably despise them. True, they've become American citizens and voters, but haven't lost their distaste for their native governments. and those consistently anti-left Cubans and Venezuelans meet with both Republican and Democratic politicians who value their votes equally. So each time the U.S. confronts Venezuela, like now, or Cuba in the past, politicians are ready to sacrifice their party's agenda for actual voters, who are much more important, hence the Democrats who support Trump's operation. New York's new Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who was sworn into the office on January 1st, expressed his own opinion on the matter. Naturally, he condemned Maduro's capture as a violation of international law. Moreover, he reportedly phoned Trump personally to express his indignation, which outraged the Republicans. Like, who the hell are you? You're just a mayor. However, it's not surprising that Mamdani had something to say about the operation in Venezuela. After all, it'll all resolve in his city. Maduro is in Brooklyn and the court is a few blocks away from the mayor's office. As for Republicans, their reactions aren't as funny as their context. The vast majority expressed their overwhelming approval for Trump and his operation. No surprises here. The exception is die-hard mega speakers like Tucker Carlson who oppose any interventions. Another operation's opponent was the only true libertarian in the Congress, Thomas Massie. However, the difference between Trump and his Republican supporters is in their justification for Maduro's abduction. Republican MOCs and senators quoted their predecessors from the U.S. history of wars and interventions and said they did it for democracy. Like, Maduro was a dictator who oppressed his people and smuggled drugs to the U.S., which he'll now pay for. Maduro's arrest is supposed to save Americans' lives. However, dear Mr. Donald Trump says nothing about democracy and safety. He attended several press conferences and spoke to journalists on his plane, and every time presented a single reason for the operation: oil. We are going to get the oil, we'll be selling oil, it's going to be great. Have a look at famous Republican hawk Senator Lindsey Graham and POTUS Trump commenting on Maduro's arrest.
There are going to be Americans alive today because he shut down a narco-terrorist state called Venezuela. This is a good thing, not a bad thing.
And the oil companies are going to go in and rebuild their system.
Long story short, there's a slight difference in justifications. But overall, the GOP predictably supports Trump. But let's forget about politicians. What do regular Americans think of it? Two major polls asked directly about the Maduro operation since January 3rd. 33% of Reuters respondents supported it, 2/3 of Republican voters and 1/3 of Democrats. 72% expressed their concerns about the U.S. being bogged down in Venezuela's internal affairs. The Washington Post's poll showed that 40% approved the operation. 42% opposed it, with the rest being unsure. So the majority of Americans aren't particularly stoked on the affair. However, this isn't exactly bad news for Trump. When compared to the polls conducted before Maduro's capture, it turns out that 16% more approved it post factum. That's perhaps because the operation itself went as smoothly as it could. They came, they grabbed him and took him away. They made a lot of pics and held a press conference. No U.S. serviceman died. Naturally, people enjoyed the flawless execution and the approval rate increased. So Trump has a reason to celebrate. Share your opinion about this operation in the comments. Obviously, the U.S. operation in Venezuela stands out with its fast pace. Unlike America's previous geopolitical escapades in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Maduro's capture was swift and the affair is pretty much over. This seems to be Trump's way. You may remember last year's summer when he hit Iran, which many experts and analysts had feared for decades. However, the air attacks took place, the aircraft made it to base, and that was it. The same happened now. Maduro's taken, let's move. Maduro was captured a week ago, but the POTUS is already contemplating new moves and looking for another target. Trump let Venezuela's neighbor, Colombia, have it. It's a decent country, not without a plethora of internal issues. But far away from a dictatorship, Trump threatened the Colombian President Gustavo Petro with another operation if needs be. However, a subsequent phone call seems to have mollified Trump. Petro is visiting the White House soon. Then Trump remembered about Mexico, called its President Claudia Sheinbaum a brave woman, but urged her to do something about the cartels. Of course, he didn't miss an opportunity to mention a possible invasion of Cuba that perhaps has something to do with her. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's been talking about overthrowing the Cuban regime for quite a while, and of course, everyone's discussing the Trump second term's I've-forgotten meme, the proposed annexation of Greenland. On the day of Maduro's arrest, January 3rd, the wife of Trump's advisor Stephen Miller posted the map of Greenland under the American flag and a caption, "Soon." When asked about Greenland, Trump responded, "We have to have it," which naturally stirred an outrage in Europe. Just a reminder, Greenland belongs to Denmark, which is a part of NATO and America's loyal ally. Any hints on the island's annexation vexed Denmark and the entire Europe, which doesn't seem to concern Trump much. He's developed his signature hit-and-run approach to foreign policy, like, let's act first and deal with consequences later. Of course, many of his rants remain rants, but very few people believed in Maduro's arrest, too. Quite possibly, the Venezuelan operation's success will inspire Trump's future endeavors, and he has quite some time to test his new method. All we can do is to observe Trump's success and its consequences. See you tomorrow.